and welcome to IGC News. Today is our annual 9/11 Memorial segment. My name is Rachel Church, and today my co-host and I will be discussing the topics of 9/11 and the War on Terror.
Hi, my name is Marina Romero, and I would like to thank you all for joining us this morning.
To begin this morning, we will be sharing a little bit of background information on the War on Terror and the important people that played a role in this event.
A key part of the whole War on Terror was the constant rivalry between the U.S. and Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda is a terrorist group that was formed in 1988. One of the main leaders of Al-Qaeda was Osama bin Laden, who, until 2011, when he was killed, was a major threat to the U.S.
And actually, something that is not known by many people is that in 1993, a bomb exploded in the parking garage of the World Trade Center. Sadly, the bomb killed 6 people and left nearly 1,000 injured. The bomb was eventually linked to Al-Qaeda.
Good point, Rachel. But actually, the bomb in the parking garage was never linked to Al-Qaeda, but rather a group of Islamic extremists. But this did cause a lot of suspicion for Americans.
Now we will hear about the actual day of 9/11 from Stephen Liu, an expert on this topic. We are very lucky to have him here with us today. Stephen?
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on the IGC News Report with you today.
Stephen, can you please tell us about Al-Qaeda and the important people who played a role in the actual day of 9/11?
Sure, I can do that.
Stephen, can you tell us right now?
Oh yeah, sorry. So the first flight that crashed into the North Tower of World Trade Center was American Airline Flight 11. It crashed at 8:46, and Mohammed Atta was the hijacker of Flight 11, as well as being a member of Al-Qaeda.
Can you please tell us about any other relevant people during this day who were connected to Al-Qaeda?
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was an advisor and financier of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. He was the uncle of Ramzi Youssef, lead bomber in the bombing attack, and he admitted his involvement in 2002. After admitting his involvement, he was arrested in Pakistan by the CIA and taken to Guantanamo Bay.
Please tell us a little more about the founding of Guantanamo Bay.
Guantanamo Bay is a military prison located in Cuba and was opened in 2002. Suspected enemy combatants were sent to Guantanamo and tortured. The government opened this detention camp in hopes of getting any information of possible terrorist attacks. Inmates in Guantanamo were subjected to routinely searches.
Okay, now can we get back to the topic of the day of 9/11, please? What was the next major event to take place?
New York officials demanded everyone in South Tower to evacuate immediately. At 9:03 a.m., the second hijacked plane, Flight 175, crashes into the South Tower once again, killing hundreds in the building and everybody on board.
What were the first security measures that officials made to ensure no other planes would be hijacked?
Well, shortly after the plane crashed into the South Tower, all planes taking off or going to the New York City were banned. Also, bridges and tunnels in New York City were closed.
Were taking these safety precautions effective?
In my opinion, they were necessary because they prevent any further possible hijacks to take place. Although these safety precautions were being taken in New York, we weren't expecting another attack in Washington, D.C.
What happened in Washington, D.C.?
Flight 77, another plane which was already in the air, was on its way to Washington, D.C., headed for the Pentagon. It killed 59 passengers and 125 in the Pentagon and injured many more.
Can you tell us about the plane that was on its way to Washington, D.C. that was planning to crash into another building?
Right, so the last plane that planned to crash into a building in Washington, D.C., passengers aboard the plane called family and friends to say a final goodbye before they took control of the plane and crashed it into an empty field in Pennsylvania. By crashing the plane into the empty field, the passengers knew it would not harm many people. The people aboard Flight 93 risked their lives to save others and are true heroes to us.
Thank you so much for the facts you shared with us today, and thank you for sharing your opinion on this very significant topic.
Yes, thank you, and we hope to see you back here on IGC News with us soon.
Bye, thank you.
Today, one of our crew members from IGC News is on the campus of La Jolla Country Day, where he will be interviewing faculty members and discussing what they were doing and where they were on the actual day when they found out about the news of September 11th, 2001.
Hi, my name is Lewis, and I'm here on the campus of LJCDS, and we're going to interview Mr. Jenkins. We're here with Mr. David Jenkins, and he's going to share his experiences on 9/11 with us. It's a pleasure to have you.
Pleasure to be here.
Okay, so let's start it off. Can you tell us about what you were doing when you first heard the news?
I sure can. I was still in the Navy, and I was at home. I was all dressed. I was getting ready to go into work. I worked over at NES North Island. I was the auxiliary base over there, and I remember I know exactly where I was in the house. I was about the fourth step down in our upstairs, downstairs, coming down the stairs, and I remember my daughter, who was, oh, goodness gracious, she was about 12 or 13 years old. She came, I saw her come out of the corner of my eye from her bedroom, and she said, "Hey, Dad. I said, "What?" She says, "A plane just crashed into the World Trade Center." And she'd been very familiar with the World Trade Center because we're from New York and we've visited it before. So I said, "What, are you kidding me?" And immediately what I thought was it was just some, a small civilian plane, something like that somehow crashed into the tower. So immediately I went downstairs, turned on the TV, and that was, I learned what happened, and immediately I knew it was terrorism. There's no doubt in my mind.
Okay. What were your first reaction, and what were your first thoughts that went through your head?
My reaction was, what? What do you mean someone flew into the World Trade Center? Because I know it's a very, the airspace around New York City is pretty restricted. You see a lot of small planes and helicopters often flying around the East River and the Hudson River. But to run into the World Trade Center, I said, this is, what's going on here? So at first it was some disbelief. And again, when I went downstairs and I saw the plumes of smoke, and you start to see some of the other footage, you say, "Oh my goodness!" I couldn't believe it, because I had grown up. Being born and raised in New York, I had grown up visiting Manhattan and seeing the World Trade Center, and it's always been a permanent part of the New York skyline for me. But it was disbelief, just absolute disbelief.
Was there anybody you knew who personally was affected by 9/11?
Yeah. Well, my first thought was my brother, who was he works for Wall Street. Was, oh my goodness, could Peter, my brother, be affected by this? So I know I made a phone call back east and found out that Peter was okay. The other person was actually, I knew one of the pilots in one of the planes. In a previous tour, probably 5 or 6 years prior to 9/11, I was I did a tour in a squadron in Pensacola, and we were flight instruction squadron, and a fellow by the name of Mike Horrocks was a young Marine captain, 03, who was one of my flight instructors, and Mike had gotten out right around the time that I was leaving the squadron. He separated from the Marine Corps, and he got picked up by United Airlines, and Mike, come to find out later, Mike was the co-pilot of one of the planes. There was also a fellow I knew from high school. His name was Greg Stajic, who was, we played baseball together. He was a year older than me. We played on the Kings Park baseball team together. And Greg, after he had graduated from high school, we went our separate ways. And Greg was he was a fireman, and he lost his life fighting one of the fires in World Trade Center. So I think those are probably the two folks who jump out in my mind as far as the World Trade Center. I did have a lot of friends in the military, but I don't think I recall any who were in the Pentagon.
At the time, did the media inform you well of what happened, or do you think that you were somewhat misinformed by the media?
Oh no! I thought the media did did a good job. You know, there was tons of film footage, lots of speculation on what would happen. But no, I felt like the media did a good job. I felt very well informed.
Is there anything else you would like to add to the interview, or is that it from you?
No, that's it. Unless you have any more questions.
No, okay. Thank you so much for the interview. It's a
You
pleasure
bet.
to have you.
You bet. Enjoyed it. Thanks.
Once again, we're at La Jolla Country Day, and we're here to make one more interview with Mr. Fleischacker. Here. Hi, Mr. Fleischacker.
Hello,
Pleasure to have you. Do you mind if I ask a few questions about 9/11?
please go ahead.
During 9/11, what were you first doing when you heard the news?
I remember coming downstairs at my house, turning on the TV and watching the news. And the news was about the first plane hitting, and then while I was watching the second plane hit.
What was your first reaction when you first heard the news?
I suspected it was a terrorist attack, and when the second plane hit, I was quite sure it was a terrorist attack.
Was there anybody you knew who was personally affected by 9/11?
I had some former students in New York, one of whom told me there were some friends of hers who died, but not anyone I knew personally.
Okay. And at the time, do you think you were well informed by the media of what happened?
I think so. I think there was quite a bit of information. What happens usually with media is they give you, there's some incorrect information as the rumors fly, but I didn't see any sort of attempt to not give you the best information possible.
Do you think all the acts that were put in place as a result of 9/11 are needed? Like airport security enforcement?
They were understandable, but I have questions about some of them. I'm kind of torn. I'm a strong pro-national defense person, but I'm also a libertarian. So a lot of these issues like the Patriot Act are, pretty difficult to deal with.
Okay. I think that's it for now. Thanks so much for letting us
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thanks.
Interesting, don't you think?
Yes.
Alright, now let's touch base and talk about the aftermath of 9/11 and the War on Terror.
A month after the 9/11 attacks, U.S. President George W. Bush declared that we should have military operations in Afghanistan.
Right, and Bush sent troops to Afghanistan because he was hoping to get rid of Al-Qaeda. The U.S. launched Operation Enduring Freedom.
And what Operation Enduring Freedom did was help build many military bases in the major cities of Afghanistan.
So militarily, the first thing the U.S. did was drop bombs on the city of Kabul in Afghanistan. The U.S. dropped bombs in Afghanistan before sending troops so they could try to eliminate terrorists before risking American soldiers' lives. But sure enough, the U.S. did send many troops to Afghanistan.
The U.S. believed a lot of terrorism could be prevented if the government was given the discretion to listen to phone conversations and track emails and texts of anyone in the U.S. suspected of having ties with suspicious organizations that might be planning terrorist attacks. In order to give the government the discretion to do this, the USA Patriot Act was passed.
Exactly, and the USA Patriot Act is actually an acronym for Uniting and Strengthening America by Providing Appropriate Tools Required to Intercept and Obstruct Terrorism.
So we can see this pattern of the U.S. taking many precautions to help stop and prevent terrorism. The next thing the U.S. did was create the TSA, which stands for Transportation Security Administration.
The TSA was founded only a month after 9/11 attacks, and the main goal of the TSA was to protect against any dangerous items or substances being taken onto planes, ultimately trying to prevent terrorism.
Right, and before 9/11 attacks, there was not that much airport security present. It was not required to take off shoes and belts, and you could even carry a water bottle or soda with you to your airport gate.
Exactly, and as most of you now know, airport security is very, very strict, all for the safety of U.S. citizens.
Another key decision that George W. Bush made was sending troops to Iraq in 2003. He sent troops to Iraq because he thought there were more of al-Qaeda members planning to plot terrorist attacks. This ended up being completely false.
Troops were stationed in Iraq for a very long time. In 2011, U.S. troops were finally withdrawn from Iraq. At the time, Barack Obama was president. The 9 long years of military operations in Iraq costed the U.S. 4,000 soldiers' lives and over $1 trillion.
Right, let's get back to Afghanistan. So when all the changes and everything was going on in the U.S., Afghanistan was drafting a new constitution in January of 2004. The goal of the new constitution was to turn years and years of occupation by the Soviet Union and rule by the Taliban into a democracy.
The fact that Afghanistan drafted a new constitution actually gave some hope to the U.S. that the military operations were helping turn Afghanistan into a better nation.
Exactly, and also in Afghanistan in 2004, a new president that wanted to maintain democracy was elected. His name is Hamid Karzai. He is still to this day the president of Afghanistan. In 2009, he won his second term because his opponent, Abdullah, refused to go all the way through the election process.
Meanwhile, in the U.S., there was a newly elected president, Barack Obama. When Obama was elected in 2009, he sent 17,000 troops to Afghanistan and started withdrawing troops from Iraq because he realized that the military operations in Iraq were doing more harm than good.
Obama then set a goal, also in 2009, to withdraw troops from Afghanistan by 2011. This never ended up happening, as he sent 30,000 more troops to Afghanistan. At the time, there was a total of 100,000 U.S. troops in Afghanistan.
Right, and to bring back up a key person of the war on terrorism that we talked about just a bit ago, Osama bin Laden. Just to briefly review, Osama bin Laden was one of the head terrorists in Al-Qaeda and the planner of 9/11 attacks.
And in May of 2011, Osama bin Laden was killed by U.S. forces. The U.S. had fulfilled their long-time mission of capturing Osama bin Laden.
A few years after Osama bin Laden was killed, Obama finally wanted to reach his goal of withdrawing troops from Afghanistan.
Withdrawing troops from Afghanistan by 2011 was Obama's ideal goal, but he did not meet it.
Currently, there are still troops in Afghanistan, but luckily many and most have returned back to their homes.
Yes, and for that we are very happy for all of for those troops and their families. Now let's touch base on what is currently happening in Afghanistan.
So something very significant that we need to understand is the Taliban. The Taliban is basically a violent organization centralized in Afghanistan.
One of the many reasons why the U.S. was in Afghanistan was to try and overthrow the Taliban.
The U.S. wanted to overthrow the Taliban because they were helping al-Qaeda plot terrorist attacks. And prior to the whole war on terror in Afghanistan, the Taliban was controlling the government.
Right, and to not get confused between Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, Al-Qaeda is a Middle East terrorist organization, whereas the Taliban is just located in Afghanistan, but has since then branched out and is currently also in Pakistan.
Now, the U.S. approves of Afghanistan's government.
Today, the Taliban has come back, but has little to no involvement in the government.
And today there is a slight government divide due to Afghanistan's isolated and mountainous geography.
Yes, that is correct. Since the population of Afghanistan is split into tribes, some tribes are friendly with the Taliban and others are friendly with the U.S. troops.
There has been a major drawdown of troops, and many troops are returning home to this day.